Again, good morning, and for joining us for Managing Stress and Creating Personal Wellness webinar. I'm Anthony Arena. I'm part of the sponsorship team here at New Jersey Business and Industry Association. This morning, we have a great guest, Stephanie Marcello. She is from RWJ Barnabas Health. She has her PhD. She is the Assistant Vice President and Chief Psychologist of Academics, Innovation, and Integration at Rutgers Behavioral Health Care Center. This webinar this morning, she's going to share with us today some tips and insights to this important topic. This program will take evidence-based approach on practical tools that can be applied immediately in life and at work. It's aimed at developing personal wellness. The focus will be continuing your personal journey, no matter where you are in life. There are a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Just to let you know, this is being recorded so that you can always receive a copy of this. If something happens, if you're having some technical difficulties, you will definitely receive a copy of this webinar within a week. I'd also like to draw your attention to the question and answer box. Stephanie would love to have your questions answered, so please just put them into the box, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, for those of you who are new to NJBIA, we are the nation's largest statewide business association, representing about 1/4 of all New Jersey employees. We offer customer development opportunities visibly through our events, our magazine, and then our podcast and television show. And we have money-saving discount opportunities for businesses like yourself that you're probably already paying for, such as payroll, healthcare, training, and 401k solutions, and 24-hour HR support. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for having me. I also love to use the chat box, so feel free. If you have any comments, I'll be monitoring it as I'm talking throughout. I'm really happy to be here today. I work also at Rutgers UBHC and really have focused a lot on wellness. And I've done most of my work working with individuals who have pretty serious trauma. And it became really apparent that if we kind of weren't addressing wellness for ourselves, for the healthcare, for the workforce, that we could also really be struggling in the work that we were doing. And so really have been embarked on this wellness journey for myself and also with individuals that I work with. So I would invite you to spend some time and be present as much as you possibly can today. We're going to talk a lot about what are some of the distractions that happen in our day-to-day life, and what are some really practical things that you can do, and what are some things that sometimes get in the way. So the first thing, so if you have access to a computer, and obviously you're probably on a computer, unless you're on your phone, you could do it. Please go to menti.com and type in this code. And there's going to be 2 questions that come up. So menti.com, and the code is 92565998. I'm going to stop sharing this. And there's going to be 2 questions for you to ask. That's going to pop up on the screen here once we start getting answers in. So let me show you. Oops, I didn't want to share that. Let me do this. So go there and put your answers in. The first question is going to be use an emoji to say how you are feeling today. So let's take a moment to check in with ourselves. And the next is going to be, can you see the Menti page, Anthony? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So here's the quick check-in. This is pick an emoji that describes your mood today. Oh, yes. I'm going to start to view the results as they come in. Oh, no results yet, so we'll give me a minute for that. 50% responded. And then there's a second question. Actually, let me take it off the screen while they're still coming up. There's a second question that asks you, in 3 words, how could being more mindful impact your life? So let's get that question up. show the results on the screen. So in 3 words, and if you can't get to that, just think about it. How could, there we go. How could being more mindful impact your life? Now, these are your words. You could be more organized. So when the bigger the word, that means that more of your colleagues have used the exact same word as you. So peaceful and calm, happy, family, validating, patient. So peaceful, calm, love, and happy. So we still have results coming in. So being more present in a world that doesn't really give us a lot of reinforcement for being present. So I'm looking on my other screen if you see me over here. So peaceful, calm, happy, and happiness. And that's some of the chat. So let's see the results for where people are at today with their emoji. I don't know why this one's not working quite as well. It's not working quite as well. So we'll just get off that one for a second. So I think, it's important to look at and see kind of where you are at and check in with ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And that's something that we don't often do. The other practice, and one of the most practical practices that we'll talk about today, is the practice of arriving. So most of us run from meeting to meeting. Then we run if you have kids or you have family members, people that you're taking care of. We run and we just keep going with our schedule and our calendar until maybe at the end of the day, we're exhausted. I don't know about you guys, but some days I'm really tired. And so this practice of arriving and giving ourselves a moment to be present in the space and the meeting that we're in can only take a few seconds, but it's pretty powerful. And so what I'm going to ask you to do right now is we are going to gift ourselves a moment of arriving to this presentation together. We're going to practice some breathing throughout. And for some awful reason, my PowerPoint is completely gone. So let's hope we can get that back. And if you have any thoughts or questions while I'm getting that back, you can put that in there. Here we go. Got it. Okay. So one of the things that we do that's really helpful is you could do this in meetings. It's just a daily practice. And sometimes we'll start a meeting like this. And even if you're not at a place that would start a meeting like this, it's something that you can do for yourself. The little things, and that's going to be a theme of this presentation, that we think are little aren't really that little. They add up to a whole bunch of self-compassion and wellness that we create for ourselves. So how are you today? One word, physically. How are you intellectually? How are you emotionally? And how do you feel spiritually and or socially? So just take a moment to kind of pause. And I love to do this in groups, but unfortunately we can't today, is how are you physically? One word. Take a moment to arrive in your chair and to be present in this presentation. How are you intellectually? Are you feeling stimulated? Are you feeling exhausted? How are you emotionally? Do you feel content? Are you stressed? Are you anxious? And how are you spiritually or socially? Are you feeling connected? Are you feeling connected to friends, to loved ones, to or spiritual belief or religion or nature? Because one of the things that we find is when these things are off, we often feel a disconnection from self, which often creates a disconnection from the people around us. And so one of the first steps to really creating wellness and managing stress of this ever-changing world is that connection with self and realizing where you're at and that awareness of where you're at. And so there is so much power and also so much science and so much research into a 2-minute mindfulness practice. What that breath can do, and you really just to focus on breathing, is it unhijacks your attention and brings you to the present moment. And more science is always coming out to reinforce the power of the breath. And what it does is it grounds us in the moment. So much of our day is spent living in the future, the next meeting, what we have to do tonight, what we're making for dinner, all the other stressors that are coming in, or in the past, what we did wrong, what we didn't do yesterday, things coming up from childhood all the way back there. And we don't spend as much time in the moment. And the moment is where the peace is. And one of the most powerful ways to have that is through the breath. And so I'll just invite everybody right now, just close your eyes for a moment. Just feel your back in your chair. Feel your body supporting you, your arms. Feel your feet touching the ground. You are grounded in this moment. And just focus on your breathing. I will put a breathing activity in the chat box and we will send it out to everyone. One of the most powerful parts about the breath is the exhale. So I'm going to ask you to just take a regular breath in and a long exhale. And just thank your body for supporting you today in your chair. Realize if your hands are feeling tense, unlock the tension in your face, let your jaw go. We hold a lot in our jaws and our face. And just take a couple minutes to arrive today and focus on your breath. When you're ready, just come back. And you might consider just taking note of how it feels to honor yourself with those 2 minutes of mindfulness practice. One of the things it does is it helps our awareness come into the moment, and that's where your peace is. Here's what we know, and this data is really alarming, and we're seeing this more and more as a psychologist and in the behavioral health field, is symptoms of anxiety and depression are significantly up. That, I've seen results even higher than 32%. These are the ones that we're reporting that individuals, adults, especially 18 to 24, but it's really not much better for 25 to 49 and 50 to 64, are really endorsing a lot of symptoms of anxiety and depression. Um, we know that we were severely impacted during COVID, but I believe that all COVID did is COVID did a lot of things, but one of the things COVID did is expose how people were already struggling even before COVID. And what COVID has done afterwards is made it so challenging to look at the struggles that we're taking. It's that we can't actually ignore it anymore. That I really think so much of it was there before, we just didn't talk about it as much. And so it's important to really look at that there's a lot of workplace issues, and we're focusing on the workplace in this moment, but there's all kinds of, right? When we look at our whole sphere of our environment, issues that are affecting our mental health. And so what we know is that people, adults, and teens is at a really alarming rate, in emerging adulthood age, really report feeling mentally unwell. And we don't see those rates going down. This has really been seen around the globe, and especially in the United States. And, it really leads us to the importance to look at what are these factors. One of the things we know is that mental health shows up differently and in different challenges for everyone, and that there are a lot of cultural considerations on how people express some of these challenges and how they get played out. So whether it's someone, men tend to engage more in substance use. And because I think also the higher suicide rates for males. And one of those challenges is because there's still so much stigma around talking about mental health that discourages people really from seeking help. And so, one thing you might consider is asking yourself, what are my beliefs about talking about things that I'm struggling with? How much do I keep inside and not share with either a professional or my best friend, or my significant other, or my safe person, whoever that may be. Because one of the things we know, and one of the most practical things I can offer you is keeping stuff inside keeps us sick. Not only does it keep us sick psychologically, that we may feel more depressed or more anxious, but there's all this research. And when we look at adverse childhood experiences and lots of other research, it keeps us sick physically. So the mind and body are connected. And so illness gets created and lives in our body when we don't let that stress out. And so one of the things that holds us back is stigma. And it's so funny because I typically, it's not really funny, but I surround myself, I'm just around a lot of behavioral health professionals. And we talk about all the uncomfortable things and we normalize it because what you realize is that most people are going through this. So, we think it's just us, but when you start talking to people and being vulnerable, they share more with you. And then I go and I talk to people not in the behavioral health field, and I'm like, oh my gosh, stigma really is still so alive and well. Um, but what COVID has done is exposed it and shown a light on it that we can't ignore it anymore because people are really suffering. There's a concept in a military term called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think that a lot of these words could resonate with a lot of us about this ever broader changing social work context that we live in. There's a lot of distractions. Our society is built with distractions, and we are constantly being pulled in so many directions and probably carrying that weight literally on our shoulders. When you work with an adult, the tension that we tend to carry here or in different parts of our body makes it that it's really easy to lose track of what we're doing. I mean, how many times have you gone somewhere and you're like, why was I here? It's not that there's cognitively anything wrong with you. It's that you're doing way too much and your brain is holding on to so many things. And what we realize, when you arrive at work and not know how you got there, is not being present. We're living so much, being pulled in so many direction, and it feels like this. And then there's so many things happening in the world that pull us in this way. And so in this modern world where there's constant distractions, learning these skills that we're going to talk about today, and not just learning them, but practicing them and overlearning them so that you can actually access them when you need them, becomes more and more important when we really focus on our own wellness. Part of my motivator, and I saw a lot of guys, your motivators, like family and happiness, is being a good role model for my children. I have a teenage daughter, being a good role model for her and my son. But coming to this point in life where you're like, I deserve to do these things for myself to be well. Studies show, recent studies, that we're spending so much of our time with our mind wandering and feeling distracted and unfocused that it's really taking us away from being engaged with people in our life. The biggest protective factor, the thing that protects us the most against anxiety, depression, substance use, illness, is connection to other people. And so it's like a perfect recipe to set us up to struggle. I work with a lot of people, and one of the things we focus on a lot is meaning. What's the meaning in the busyness of life? And the busyness keeps us busy. It doesn't necessarily keep us fulfilled. And so adding in some of these practices can have such a significant impact. Sometimes people will come in and we will do this activity called like a pleasurable activity. So they would talk to me about like the things that really bring them joy, the things that make them feel fulfilled, the things that bring them pleasure. And typically what we find is they're not doing any of them. And then they're struggling. And, we make a lot of reasons as to why we can't do things, our busy lives, and a lot of them are really valid. But can you take several minutes a day to arrive, to focus on the breath? What we find is most people don't have the skills and strategies to manage these challenges that we're facing every day. So it's like another perfect recipe for disaster in a lot of ways. So we live in this really busy society. We took a look at that word VUCA, and it's ever changing. We're distracted. We're really busy, and most people don't have the skills to know how to create this personal wellness within themselves. And so that leads to the higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, substance use, that show up in little ways. And really what it leads to, I think, is unfulfillment of this wonderful gift that we have and the wonderful people that we have in our lives loving us and present for us that sometimes we can't see because we get so busy. And we all do this. I do it too, and have to really try to bring myself back. 70% is the average time reported that people are unable to be attentive in meetings. There's a lot of meetings. Maybe we don't need as many meetings, but that's a whole other topic. But our ability to not be attentive, our mind is wandering, we're doodling 10 things we remembered that we have to do and not focusing and not being able to be present. Presence is where you find your joy. Presence is peace. And learning those skills to have that in some part of our day really creates that feeling of internal happiness. 2% is the average time that people say that they spend in their day for their own like personal productivity. So spending time on themselves. I get it. I work full time. I have two teenagers that I'm driving all over. Also a lot try to make time for exercise and drink water and like all of these things. But those little things add up to a whole bunch of big things. So here we are on autopilot, and notice the two pieces of cardboard are covering this guy's face. And so we think about, we walk around sometimes and we have these glasses on and a vision where we can just see what's within in front of us. I got to get this done. I have to do this as my to-do list. I have to be here. All these pressures we put on ourselves and all of these worries about work, money, relationships. So the attention is in the past or the future. So we're distracted, some of us, right? Less aware. And when we are in this mode of feeling less aware and feeling distracted, we tend to act on our habits and our patterns and our assumptions. Meaning, if your loved one comes to you after work and they're telling you something, and your typical response is to be annoyed with them, because you're on autopilot, you'll go right to that annoyance. Like, all right, I heard you, you already told me, you sent me an email. When we're in the moment, we tend to rely more on listening and trying to understand what they're telling us rather than reacting. And that's really powerful when we feel heard and when we feel listened to and when we can offer that to the people in our life, our coworkers, our significant other, our friends, our children. And it's, again, really hard to do. This is one of my, Viktor Frankl wrote the most wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a really important quote, I think. So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Practice the pause. That's what I like to call it. Something's really frustrating at work. We're in autopilot. Practice the pause. Go into the bathroom. Do a couple breaths, wiggle your toes, remind yourself that you're alive in this moment. We don't have to respond to everything that's coming at us all the time. It will all be okay. And if we have beliefs that it won't, maybe we can work on challenging them a little bit. Like when you're sick and things don't get done and everything's still okay. Because when we have presence, we can be more productive because we can be more aware and we could be more focused. This is kind of how do we get from mindful to awareness? One of the most powerful ways that we just talked about is breathing. So I want to give you this science. There's science behind, there's really deep rooted decades of neuroscience behind all of this. Breathing retraining, I'm going to call it breathing retraining. We need to retrain ourselves, unless we're already engaged in this practice, to focus on our breath. And what that does is it gets our nervous system. So just really kind of simple. There's the sympathetic nervous system. This is this part of our body that gets reactive when a bear is chasing you. So let's just say, hopefully this never happens, but let's say a bear is chasing you and you are going to have a physiological reaction. You could start sweating, right? Your heart's beating faster, you're clenching, your heart is pounding. So physiologically, your body starts responding. But what's happening a lot of times to people in everyday society is we're activating that sympathetic nervous system as if a bear was chasing us. And we're focused in that way where our adrenaline and our nervous system is so activated, but there's no bear. And so what breathing does is triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that calms us. And that's why regular breathing, regular focus on the breath has been shown to improve mood, reduce anxiety. It's so powerful because it can shift your energy. It can shift your energy from autopilot to aware. And, in the little bit of time that we had today, where we kind of checked in with ourselves really quickly and focused on that breath and our awareness in our seats, I wonder if you noticed a shift in your own energy. So there's been a lot of researchers that have found that we can really control a lot of our emotions and feelings through our breathing. So paying attention to our breath is one gift that possibly could help motivate your reason for wanting to be more mindful. Taking 2 minutes before a meeting to arrive isn't going to delay that meeting. And if those 2 minutes, or if you are a leader or supervisor and you could start a meeting arriving with the individuals a part of your team, the focus that you'll get will be a lot more than if you just arrive and get right into it. And think back to those earlier slides that we talked about. So I'm going to send this over, or I'm going to ask, that the team sends this over to you. And I would invite you to consider using this breathing retraining exercise and practicing it for the next week when you're not stressed, when you're most calm, and overlearning it, just like you overlearned how to ride a bike, just like you've overlearned other skills that you had. Breathing retraining is the same thing. We're retraining our breath away from the way society kind of trains us in our particular culture, so that when you've retrained yourself to breathe in this way, you can access it when you are feeling stressed or anxious. What you're going to notice is your mind's going to wander. That's okay. It's completely normal, typical, common. Watch if you beat yourself up to be like, I can't believe this, right? And just be like, that's what happens. Normalize it. And if you get distracted, just notice it and then come back to the breath. So I'm going to ask you to write down or think about 5 people that you love. Just write down 5 people that you love on a little piece of paper in front of you. Who are the first 5 people that come to mind? Okay, so take another couple seconds. If you wrote yourself down, please put in the chat box that the word yes. If you put one of the people that you love as yourself, please write yes in the chat box. We forget ourselves. No one wrote yes in the chat box. We forget about ourselves. So often we forget about ourselves. Who is the first person who's loved you? Yes, caregiver, whatever, but you, the person who's been there for you all along, who's always with you, is us. The person that we oh, wait, did someone say yes? Woo! Awesome, Anthony. And for the rest of us, it's okay. But would you consider writing yourself in there? Do you love, what kind of love are you showing to yourself every day? These are the gifts that we give ourselves. And so a lot of times I'll work with people, or I've worked with organizations, and they'll say something like, my boss doesn't create time for this, or I don't, there's lots of reasons and excuses. And, if we wait for the systems we work in, for the organizations we work in, for our families, for like the world to create this time for us, we're going to be waiting for a long time. And the only person we're actually harming is ourselves. And so Dr. Peggy Schwarbrick, who developed the 8 Dimensions of Wellness, who I have the honor of working with at Rutgers, she talks about a conscious, deliberate process that requires the person to become more aware of and making choices for a more satisfying lifestyle. And so I wonder if you're willing to make this deliberate process for yourself to decide to do some of these activities that we talked about today already. This is a powerful activity, and I'm also going to put in here a wellness inventory at the end that you can consider taking this inventory for yourself to kind of see where you're at. One of the things I like to look at, and these are the 8 dimensions of wellness, and there is a dimension cut off, so we'll send that around too. Is where am I? Like, what do I feel like? If I had to pick a dimension or two of wellness that I think I'm doing really well at, which one would it be? So I think there's emotional wellness that was cut off. I'd probably pick that for myself because I've really intentionally and deliberately focused on that area. And then what's an area of wellness that maybe I might want to continue to work on? And you can take this quiz and you can kind of get a gauge of where you are. That whole idea of checking in with ourselves and our self-awareness is so important to see where you're at. How do we build emotional intelligence? Because what we're talking about right now is EQ. Emotional intelligence is simply being aware of one's and others' emotions. What have you learned about expressing your emotions? What have you learned? Did you learn to keep them inside? How do you express different feelings? Feelings are just feelings. We give them power, we give them weight, they come and go. And how aware are you with what's going on inside your own body? So you're ready to go into a meeting and you're super annoyed because you know this is going to be a frustrating meeting with some of the same frustrating things. And can you take that moment to recognize where you hold that emotions in your body and to release that so you can go in and try to be a little more present and also just for your own health? So emotional and social intelligence competencies are really powerful. I would really suggest a book. Daniel Goleman, he wrote the book on emotional intelligence, and really focuses on these 4 areas. But essentially, the left side is just about knowing your emotions and recognizing them, but also managing them. So it's totally fine to feel anger. It's actually very healthy to experience a range of all emotions, but it's probably not the way you want to handle it by screaming, or getting annoyed or frustrated at a loved one. It's okay to feel anger, but maybe there's other things you can do. Exercise has been shown to be one of the most powerful tools that we have, walking, any kind of exerting some of those emotions. The right side is also an important side. And so maybe might want to consider reading a book on emotional intelligence and start to kind of build these skills. What we know is that leaders, you can have all the intellectual ability out there. And what we have really found is the most effective leaders have high EQ. The right side is how do you recognize and understand other people's emotions? Because this in turn impacts how you manage relationships. And that's pretty powerful. I love this study that looked at where do people hold energies in their body. So they asked all these individuals, where do you feel energized in your body when you feel happiness? And those are the red and like orange areas. And happiness is kind of felt throughout. And then they asked people, where do you feel fear? And so a lot of people, it's like the stomach up, experience that. And where do you feel anxiety? That tends to be similar, but look at how some of like fear, anxiety, love are activated in some of the same regions. And so another powerful thing that you can do is what we call the body scan. Scan your body for, people clench their fists a lot of times when they're angry. Release those fists. Become aware of where you hold different feelings in your body by noticing where the energy is when you're feeling those feelings. What brings you joy? That emotional awareness. What energizes your body? This weekend, my son's basketball team won a championship, and he was MVP. And I felt such joy for him, not because he won, but because how hard he works. And I mean, it just came out of me. I think it was coming out of my arms. I felt it coming out of my face. And just that awareness of where the energy lies and who energizes you in your life. Being around your one best friend, gosh, when you leave that conversation with him or her, you feel energized. You feel like you could do stuff versus being around someone who sometimes takes that energy and it's so draining from you. So that awareness, consider 3 things that bring you joy and how can you build those things intentionally and consciously and deliberately into your life. And so one thing you may consider doing is journaling. There's so much power in journaling. No pressure in it. You don't even have to write full sentences. You can write words. One of the things that you might ask yourself a question tonight, what brings me joy? And you might journal a little bit about that. And then you might consider to add one of those things into your week and notice where you feel that energy in your body when you're doing that thing that brings you joy. And maybe it's going for a run or going for a walk, but you've been so busy you haven't been able to do that. How do you unbusy your life to add moments of joy in for yourself? There was a really interesting article, research study that looked at individuals who were laid off, and they had one group of laid off professionals journal about their feelings for 5 days. And they found that the individuals who were laid off, who journaled versus the individuals who didn't, found new jobs at a much higher rate. So 68% versus 27%. So the laid off professionals who journaled for 5 days about their feelings, 68% found a job much higher than 27%. That's pretty significant. These little simple things aren't so simple. They add up to a whole lot of really big, important things that really create what we call, I think, fulfillment. So there was a review of, I think it was over 140 studies on the impact of journaling, and they showed consistent benefits in psychological and physical health. Remember, we don't talk about psychological health without including physical health. The mind and body are so connected. Illness from psychological challenges that we don't deal with, and from feelings and secrets and shame that we keep in our body, creates illness, creates cancer, creates diabetes. There's decades of research on all of this that really demonstrates the science behind this. And so just for a moment, think back, and we're not going to go back to the Menti, but I want you to think back to those top 3 reasons that you put in the Menti, into your Mentimeter, about what would be one of your main reasons for wanting to create more mindfulness in your life. Think about how important those things are to you. And maybe consider that we might want to focus on your well-being. One of the biggest pieces that we find from emotional intelligence EQ research is well-being. This is one of the biggest benefits. And there was recently, I read a book, it's maybe not recent, but I did read a book, and it's called, and this is just common throughout studies, but it was called The How of Happiness. And some of the biggest things that they found in their decades of research is gratitude. Gratitude for the little things that we have. Even in your worst day, there's gratitude. We woke up. I mean, really. And it's so important. Some of the things I do with my kids are 3 things you're grateful for. Especially when they may have had a challenging day, because it's challenging for teenagers and kids too. Positive social relationships. So the more you improve in your own emotional intelligence and can be aware of your feelings, where your feelings are in your body, and how you respond to your feelings and how you respond to the feelings of others. Think back, a half hour ago, to the idea of distraction and how being less distracted helps us be more present with the power of the breath. How that can so significantly improve social relationships. When you're engaged in a connected, vulnerable relationship where you feel heard and seen and validated, you're building that bond. And the other piece, when we look at well-being and we look at the how of happiness, is optimism and meaning of life. So how do you view the world? You know, when we have these blinders on, and I think about these goggles or those two pieces of paper, sometimes we can miss, like if we have a negative view or outlook, which is really easy to have if we're feeling kind of sad or anxious, we might miss all the positive, wonderful things that happen. And so, how do we start to kind of just expand them so that we can see the things? And remember, I talk with a lot of people about purpose and meaning. In the busyness of the day, sometimes we forget about our why. How come we're doing this? Why are we here? And it doesn't need to be some big grand thing. It's the little things every day, the little acts of kindness that can bring us joy. And going back to the 5 people you loved, we got Anthony who wrote himself, but the rest of us didn't. And we forget about ourselves. But the truth is, you matter. You matter so, so much. You matter to all the people in your life that love you, and you matter to you. You love you, right? So a couple things. Oops, I just want to go back to the slide. The idea of micro practices. Micro practices are little small practices, little breaks that you can do throughout your day. But remember, if they're not intentional, conscious, and deliberate, you might not do them. So mindful listening. Mindful listening is super cool. Try with a loved one, try with a child. It works great. I can't tell you how many times I want to jump in and solve all of my daughter's life problems for her. And I started to literally like put my hands together to make myself stop because she does not want me to solve it. All she wants me to do is listen. And the more that I can be present and not say a single word, the more she tells me. Try it with, a loved one in your life. Mindful listening. And I might say I'm showing her I'm listening. I'm looking at her. I'm nodding my head. I may say something like, that sounds really hard. Or, wow, you probably didn't know what to do. Or, wow, you handled that well, or what a tricky situation. Just like a comment versus like, I think you need to call your friends and tell them, and you should. That's what I fall into that trap sometimes. And I try to step back. Because one time she said to me, Mom, you're not listening. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not. I want to jump in there and protect my little cub. She doesn't need me to protect her. She's going to be out there in that world. She needs to learn how to protect herself. And I can protect her by listening. The other thing is the 3 breaths micro practice, focused attention. You train your mind to be less distracted. So that was that circle that I showed you. When you find your mind wandering, you just notice it and bring your mind back. I'm a big toe wiggler. I like to wiggle my toes to ground myself. There's something very grounding. I kind of picture my roots grounding into the room in the moment that I'm in to remind myself that I'm here, I'm alive, I'm in this moment, I'm not in the future moment. A minute to arrive practice, which we did today. Give yourself a minute, 1 minute. Arrive in the next meeting. Open awareness. You train your mind not to resist the chaos. Instead, you just notice and observe it. Oh, look, I'm thinking about what I have to do tomorrow. Oh, I'm thinking about how messy my kitchen is. I was just thinking about that. So I'm just noticing it. I'm not judging it. I'm not trying to fix it. So these are just little things that you can do. Mental noting is another one I want to go over. It's a mindfulness technique that helps create space between your thoughts, emotions, and sensations by just labeling them. So you're not, oh, there's the feeling of sadness. It's not, I'm sad, I am anxious. No, you're not. You're feeling sadness. You're feeling anxiety. You are not your feelings. You are not your thoughts. And just, we know change is going to constantly be happening, right? And we know that this adaptability to change is really what creates the most intelligent of the survival of the fittest. And so as our society has changed and is, this modern world that's so chaotic, how do we change to be more adaptable? So we'll send these out. And just a note about ambivalence. One of the most common places to get stuck is on the road to ambivalence. So it's like, I really want to do some of these practices, but I got 10,000 things to do. I'm going to go to the next meeting. I forgot about this. So normalizing that you might feel ambivalent or unsure about adding some of these practices in your life, but I want you to go back and think about that main motivator that you put in that Mentimeter in the beginning. That is your reason for wanting to resolve some of that. And remember, self-compassion, people who are high in self-compassion, this is like real scientific data. 33% more resilient, 24% less burnout, and 26% lower stress. Don't beat yourself up. Who cares if you forgot to do something one day? You're allowed to be human. And there's a lot of power. I'm going to flip to this slide of letting go of control. Because the truth is, we don't have it anyway. Most of the things you worry about don't happen and have never happened. And so with how precious and short life is, I sometimes will ask myself, like, how much time do I want to give this thing that may never happen to worry about? And will I care about this in 2 weeks? It is what it is. This idea of my hula hoop. So I keep a hula hoop around me figuratively, and I decide what I want to let in. I decide who I want to let in, and I decide what I want to let in. And the rest is out there, outside of my control. What I can control is in my hula hoop, which is really myself and my behaviors and my actions. And that's a powerful thing. I will keep my hula hoop. The rest of the universe that I have no control over, I'm going to let it go like a balloon. This is the wellness inventory I will send you. If we look for happiness outside of ourselves, if we look for happiness in another person in our relationship, we expect that that person can make us happy or make us unhappy. The truth is, it's only us who can really create it. That intentional practice, we search everywhere for it, but it's inside of you. The things that bring you joy. Adjust and watch people in your life maybe consider adding some of these things into their life. That's the wonderful thing about systems, how we all kind of change in positive ways. What can you do for yourself today? One thing, write it down on a piece of paper to create a moment of joy for yourself and honor yourself.